How's it going, everybody? It's Rustabout Collector here, and today we are going to be doing a bit of a custom action figure tutorial. If you guys caught one of my earlier live streams, you saw me working on this, a 6-inch Commander Bly turned into a custom 327th Star Corps officer of sorts. I don't really know what he is yet. I might not even be technically done with him, since a lot of my customs end up being a long process where I'll do something and I'll make them into a custom, and then over time the customization will evolve and I'll add different tidbits and paint and things like that. That's how my creative process kind of works. But for right now, this is where he stands, and if you watch my live stream, like I said, you would have seen me work on this towards the end of it. I think I cleaned off one of the legs and that was about it. I think I finished most of it off screen. So today we're going to be doing basically the same technique as you see on this figure here, but to the Imperial Stormtrooper Commander. One of my biggest grievances with this figure during my review was just the awful weathering that they gave him, like the poop smears, basically. They gave him poop smears on his legs, on his butt, on his forehead. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look Stormtrooper-esque at all. So we're going to do a quick tutorial, hopefully, to just get rid of that and make the figure overall look a little bit better, at least better in my opinion. I know that with custom action figures, it's a very subjective market, so my version of a custom figure may differ from what you would make a custom figure look like, and you may think that my custom figure looks like absolute trash. And that's okay, that's how it is. So hopefully you'll find this helpful, and it will help you customize your figures the way that you want to make them. And yeah, let's get into it. So what I'm going to be using today are the ever trusty Q-tips. The name brand may vary. I'm not sponsored by the Q-tips, but you know, something like this, a cotton swab brand of some type. Then 100% pure acetone. Now I'm using the Onyx Professional brand. I heard from someone that this can make the figure sticky or tacky if you use too much of it. However, I haven't had that issue yet, so just use it with a measure of caution. You know, you're using 100% pure acetone, but maybe use 100 and then 10% of caution. You know, 100% acetone, 10% caution. It's a good thing to live by. And then I have this, which is just a black wash. I mixed it up in this little jar, but it's just rubbing alcohol and black acrylic paint. That's how I make my black washes typically, and it works for what I'm doing with it. You will also want a rag of some kind. It doesn't have to be anything special, just to wipe the black wash off as you apply it. Just good to have on hand too in case you spill anything. I've done that many times, and yeah, the mess isn't fun. So to start off here, you're just going to want to take a Q-tip and dip it into the acetone. You don't want a lot on the Q-tip. In fact, I usually dab it off on the fabric like so that there's just a little bit there. And then I'm just going to come in here basically and start wiping away the weathering. The nice thing is this figure already has a dull coat on it. It's like a very dull plastic, whatever they molded it in, so you're not really taking away the glossy sheen that the figure might have otherwise. If you're doing this on like a clone trooper or an early stormtrooper where there's a lot of gloss on the plastic, using the acetone will take away that gloss coat, but you could always add it back by giving it a clear gloss coat spray afterwards. Now this can take some time, you know, you're just slowly removing it layer by layer. You don't want to just rush it with like a massive amount of acetone and just start scrubbing away. That could remove plastic that you don't really want to remove, and you just want to be careful with this because it will eat away the plastic, and it can take away very easily paint applications that you actually would prefer to keep. And yeah, I'll just keep plugging away at this. I might cut out some of it just because for the sake of time, you probably don't want to hear me talking over this whole process. It'd get kind of boring after a while, I'm sure. this is the last little bit of brown, muddy, gross weathering that I'm going to be removing. And you want to be very careful not to get any acetone on that black forehead band, because that will come off. It is just paint. I wasn't too particular with some of the removal, like down here on the belt. I left a little bit of area there that was painted, just because once you apply the black wash, that will all kind of be blended in together, and it might add a nice effect. You know, it doesn't all have to be spick and span before you add the black wash. It's just good to have most of it, or the biggest chunks of it, kind of cleaned off, you know. Now once that is all cleaned up like that, I am going to try and remove these, at least most of these white scuffs on the shoulder pad. I just think it looks kind of bad. It doesn't match with the rest of the armor, and I think that there's better ways that it could look. I might even go back in myself and chip it up using like a sponge with some white paint afterwards, because this just doesn't look good in my opinion. So you can just go in there like so, and sounds like Bob Ross. You can just go in here and you can just, you know, put whatever you want. You know, you could put a happy tree there. Do you want a happy tree on the shoulder pad? Put a happy tree right there. That's right. Just put a happy tree right there, and it will look like a happy tree. I am going to leave some markings, some of the white markings here on the shoulder. I'm just going to try and minimize them a bit more, make them a little bit smaller, because I think that the way they are, standard, stock, unmodified, is just too gaudy or too exaggerated. I really don't know what word best suits it, but it doesn't look as good as it could in my opinion. So I'm going to leave some there, but the majority of it I am going to clean off just like that. And you can see on the back side there really isn't that much to remove, so I'm just going to leave those there and call that good. I think we'll just move on to the black wash and see how that just brings this figure all together. Okay, and then on to the black wash. Like I said, this is just a little bit of black acrylic paint. It doesn't matter what brand. I just use like Apple Barrel for something like a black wash. It doesn't need to be expensive. And then the rubbing alcohol just mixed in, probably in a ratio of about 80-20, so 80% rubbing alcohol, 20% acrylic paint. You stir that all up nice and good, and you should have a nice watery consistency. The alcohol is good for two things. One, it makes it a very smooth application, and two, it evaporates quicker than water, so once you get it where you want it on the figure, it will dry faster than it would if it was just water. So we'll start here on the torso and just start applying. It looks like it might be a little bit watery, so I might have to go in and just consider possibly, yeah, I think I'm going to thicken that up just with a little bit more acrylic paint. Again, this is just my recipe for making a black wash. I know a lot of people will buy just like a pre-made black wash, and that's really nice, gives you good quality as well. But this is just the method that I've gone with, and I find that it works pretty well. So, you know, if you've got a better method, if you have a good brand that you like, you can always recommend it down in the comments, and that will help other customizers who come by this video and, you know, are looking for hints, tips, and tricks for making their custom figures look the best that they can. I always say that there's really not one way to customize an action figure. It's however you find works best for you. And so there you can kind of see how like the figure starts to come together as the black wash settles in. You want the cracks and the crevices to be a bit darker, and you can even go back in like this and just kind of paint in a little bit more dark weathering. And that's just where the dirt and the grime is going to get stuck. And then the higher points and the ridges of the armor are going to get kind of brushed off and cleaned off as they're used. You know, in a fictional world, that's where the dirt would get cleaned off as somebody uses the armor, and the crevices would be where it actually gets dirty and grimy and kind of just stays that way. But again, this is just my method for customization. I don't pretend to be an expert in any way, shape, or form. It's just how I like my figures to look for the photos that I take with them. I like to give them a nice battle-weathered look and have them looking a bit more gritty for the photos and not so shiny and new. How much weathering you add to them really does kind of tell a story with the figures. You could give them just a little bit of weathering. You could go all out and weather them you know, completely, and that would give them a really, really like almost dead in a trench somewhere kind of look. I like to go somewhere right in the middle, something along the lines of they've seen a few battles and they've made it out with a few scratches and scars, but at the end of the day they are still alive. So, you know, again, it's all your personal taste in figures and customization. When it comes to black washes, I try not to go too heavy-handed and just make it look a little bit lighter and just give it some almost a shading effect, right? So you have it in like the corners and the crevices, and on the high rises and the highlights it's going to be much brighter and cleaner, and so it almost acts as like a self-shading effect, you know, like a Borderlands shading effect on the figure. And I just use the rag to clean off the majority of the excess, and then sometimes I'll go in here with like my finger or a clean brush and I'll really clean up the finer details. For some reason, that's just ended up being a much better way for me to do it. Doesn't always work, and you know, again, your mileage will vary on how you do it, but that's just what I've found to be a nice, effective way of doing this. Ultimately, I'm pretty happy with how that is turning out. The legs are looking good, the chest is nice and weathered, just the shoulders, the helmet, the arms, and this last calf here that needs to be done. Okay, so a slight time jump here because my camera battery apparently overheated. So finished up the legs, finished up the chest and the back, and then also this arm. So we just have the one arm and the helmet to go, and this figure will be more or less complete. Again, this is just a very simple tutorial on how to remove unwanted paint applications, and then also how to do a simple black wash weathering technique. There's a lot more that you could go into with weathering. You could use Tamiya weathering kits. You could do sponge technique and like apply chipping, things like that. For this particular figure, I didn't feel like those types of weathering would really fit with the style, I guess, that I was going for. And so I decided not to do that. But on a future custom, I think I would really like to try and do something like that and record it, because I have done the chipping techniques on my clone troopers. I've just never gone about actually recording those figures' customization process. It's more of a long process when I customize a clone trooper. I typically do it in more than one day, and I do it in different locations around my desk and things, and so the setup would be quite a bit more complex, and I've always just felt like, I'll not really mess with that. I'll just customize my figure while listening to music or watching a movie. That's just more my speed. Doing these types of tutorials I know is something that you guys like. I got a lot of hits on that Mandalorian tutorial that I did a while back, but it's just more time consuming for me, so I don't know how many of these I'll actually be able to produce, but hopefully you guys like this one. Hopefully you find it helpful. And now, finally, the helmet. The best, most recognizable part of a Stormtrooper. Mix up a little bit more onto my brush, and we'll just dive right in, applying liberal amounts of black wash to the face. And again, I always go in, and like you've seen before, I kind of do a little pinstriping along the lines that I really want to be highlighted or accentuated by the black wash. I just do a big over splash like this that just goes all over the figure initially, and most of that does get wiped away, but it helps all of it just kind of blend together and look, it sounds weird, but it helps make the black wash look uniform across the figure. It kind of just gives the whole figure a weathered look, and then you can go in and add more precise weathering in specific areas should you desire, but it helps all of the weathering blend together, look really clean. If you can use clean as a description of weathering, it helps the weathering look clean and more professional, I guess. I'm not really sure how to describe weathering when it's your goal to make something look dirty, but you're also trying to make it look crisp and nice, I guess. Clean, nice, detailed. All of those words could be used to describe customization. Okay, there we go. I'm pretty happy with that result. That looks very weathered. It's highlighted a lot of the little details in the sculpt, like around the eyes and here along the cheeks. That's exactly the goal of doing something like this with the figure. So all in all, this is a really simple way to customize your action figures. You can remove the usually pretty poor factory weathering, and really quickly you can make your figure look nicely weathered without really doing that much to damage it or destroy it. And it should come out looking something like this. And hopefully that's what you want it to look like at the end of the day. But again, this works for this figure because I like the paint applications already on it for like the blue. It was really just the Hasbro weathering that I just was not a fan of and wanted to try my hand at doing my own weathering using just a black wash. You could always go back in, like I said, and weather it with a brown wash. Add on some scuffs and scratches along the legs, add some mud splatters or something going up the leg. It's really up to you how you want to take it from here, but for me, this is probably where I'm going to leave it. I think this looks really nice and weathered and will fit alongside a lot of my other weathered Stormtroopers in many, many different scenarios, especially for the photography that I do. I don't really have a clean example that I can show you out of box, but here he is next to an in-box figure. It's the best that I can do since I'm keeping this one on card for the time being. But yeah, I think this is a much needed upgrade. It just removes the weird smudgy weathering that they did on the original, the little spots and splotches. I'm not a fan of that at all, so in a quick, maybe 30-minute sit-down session, you can remove those and weather it just like this, and I think it will look far, far better. But I think that's going to do it for this tutorial, guys. I hope it was helpful. If you have any recommendations for other customizers or, techniques that you've learned as you've done custom figures, please leave them down in the comments. I'm sure a lot of people will appreciate them and be able to make use of them on their custom figures. If you want to check out my social media, you can find a link down in the description. It'll take you to my Instagram or to my Facebook or to my Teespring, depending on where you want to go. There's also my P.O. Box address down there. If you want to send something into that, I will certainly do a unboxing video on my channel. But as always, guys, thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful to you in some way, shape, or form. Have a wonderful evening, noon, or night, and I'll catch you in the next video.